Today's lesson is 1.6, conditional statements. Let's go ahead and start with the definition of a conditional statement. These are statements that can be written in the if, then form. They can be true or they can be false, one or the other. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example. If you work hard, then you will like geometry. Notice that we start with the word if, and then we see a comma, we see the word then, and then we see a statement and a period. A conditional statement has two parts. It has a hypothesis. Make sure I spell this correctly. There we go. And it has a conclusion. You can identify the hypothesis by finding the word if. Okay, you can identify the hypothesis by finding the word if. Now, technically, the word if is not part of our hypothesis. It is just an identifier for it. Our hypothesis, for example, would be you work hard. Just the part that's after the word if and to the comma. You can identify the conclusion by finding the word then. And what's after it, you like geometry to the period, that is my conclusion. So sometimes we think of it as hypothesis, then conclusion. P, then to Q. If to then. All right, let's take a look at how we can take a conditional statement and change it. There are three different ways that we can change a conditional statement, and let's go ahead and start with the converse. Let's go down here. The converse is formed by switching the hypothesis and the conclusion. So once again, we're going to take the hypothesis and the conclusion, and we're simply going to switch them. If the conclusion, then the hypothesis. Now be very careful. You do not want to add any words. You just want to keep the theme, the idea of the conditional statement. It's very rare that we add extra words. When we are doing the converse, we're simply going to switch, okay? We're going to keep the word if and then where they belong. So it's always a good idea in your conditional statement to go ahead and identify what's the hypothesis and what's the conclusion. I use this with my two highlighters. If B is between A and C, there's that word if. So here is my hypothesis. Then AB plus BC equals AC. There's my word then. Now the reason I also, and there's my conclusion. The reason I also like to circle and box in the word if and then is because they are not going to switch places. We must always keep the if-then form. We must always keep the if-then form. So when I go to write the converse, I'm simply going to be switching the highlighted parts. So the converse would say if, and now I'm going to write the conclusion. AB plus BC equals AC. I'm going to keep the comma because that is the structure of our sentence. And now I'm going to write the word then because it has to be in that form. And now I'm going to go ahead and write the hypothesis. Then B is between A and C. Notice I didn't put in any extra words. I kept my if and I kept my then because this is a conditional statements form. And I also kept my comma right after the hypothesis. Okay? This is the converse. This is the converse. All right, next we're going to talk about negation. What does it mean to negate something? And we're going to do this before we talk about the next type of conditional statement. So when we talk about negating something, we're talking about doing the opposite of the original statement, doing the opposite of the original statement. So here's my original statement, and we're using the letter P, which is our hypothesis. That's why I highlighted it in purple. But notice this symbol right here. Let me darken it in. This symbol right here simply means that I'm going to add the word not P, okay? Let me see. So simply to do the negation, I'm just going to do the opposite, which in most cases means I'm just going to go ahead and add the word not. So here's my example. It is raining. My negation would be it is not raining. Okay, I'm not changing the words. I need to use the words it is and raining. I simply need to negate the fact that it's sunny outside and it's not raining. So I don't know what it is outside, but I know for sure that it is not raining. It could be cloudy, it could be snowing, it could be there could be a hurricane, it could be windy, but it's not raining. Okay, maybe not a hurricane. Okay, I'm not changing the words. If the word raining is in the original sentence, then it needs to be in the negation as well. I cannot take and change this word to sunny and say it is sunny. This is not a negation. Okay. Yes, it is the opposite, but also it is windy would be an opposite. It is hailing is an opposite. It is cloudy is an opposite. And so you just need to add the word not. Now be careful because sometimes the word not is already there. And you want to be careful. You cannot say it is not raining. Okay, right? That's not proper. We don't say, oh, no, no, don't, no, 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 no. You know, like we say, I'm going to not go to the store. Well, then are you going or are you not going? I don't know, right? So just be careful. If not is there, its negation is to take it out. But very, very rarely will you see that. All right, the next one that we're going to talk about is the inverse. Now, the inverse is formed by negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion. Now, I want to underline some stuff here. Both and. You've got to do both of them, okay? You have to say, if not the hypothesis, then not the conclusion. So notice right here, if not the hypothesis, then not the conclusion, okay? They must both be changed to not. They must both be negated. Okay, and just remember if the word not is already there, we don't add it again. We don't say it's not raining. We simply would say it is raining. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our example. If it is sunny, then it is hot. Let's go ahead and identify our hypothesis and conclusion. That's what you always want to do first. Remember, the colors just help you to do that. It slows you down a little bit. Oops. And it helps you to read, okay? So if it is sunny, there is my hypothesis. Then here's my conclusion. It is hot. I am going to keep the structure of the sentence because if you notice, if I pull it right down, I need to keep the purple first and I need to keep the orange second. It needs to stay in that form. Excuse me. All I'm simply going to do is add the word not into here. It is not sunny. And the word not into here. It is not hot. That's all I have to do. I'm going to keep the basic structure. If it is not sunny, comma, then it is not hot. Okay, same structure. Notice this, oh, there is my hypothesis right with my word if. Here is my conclusion right with the word then. The only thing that's been added is the negation to both. Okay? I'm not changing words. Notice the word sunny stayed the word sunny. The word hot stayed the word hot. All I simply did was add these two right here to negate them. All I did was add that to negate them. All right, the last conditional statement that we're going to talk about today is called the contrapositive. And what the contrapositive does is it kind of pulls together, well, it doesn't kind of, it does pull together the two previous conditional statements. This one is formed by switching, just like we did in the converse, and negating, oops, there we go, just like we did in the inverse, okay? The hypothesis and the conclusion. So what I want you to notice is that this one takes my P, if P, then Q, and it says if not Q, then not P. So it changes the form. Notice it adds both. It does the flip like the converse does. It switches them like the converse does. And then it adds the not to both just like the inverse does. So we're going to go ahead and do both of them. We're going to change the order. We're not going to change the structure. Remember, if and then stay where they are. The comma and the period stay where they are. It's the words for the hypothesis and conclusion that are going to switch and become the negation. They're going to become the not. Let's practice. If two angles are vertical angles, then they are congruent. So let's find the hypothesis and the conclusion because you always have to know which one is which. So here is my hypothesis. Remember, I'm looking at the structure. The word if tells me the hypothesis, and I go and I just highlight the words till I find the comma. The comma stops me, right? The comma stops me. The word then identifies my conclusion all the way to the period, which is just the end of my sentence structure. All right, I'm going to go ahead and keep the structure of if, comma, then, period, but the purple and the orange parts are going to switch and become the negation. So if, okay, so I should write if they are congruent. Now, technically, is that such a great way to start a sentence? Your English teacher might not think so, but we're going, it's fine. It's fine. We could keep it if two angles are. We could keep that. We can replace this word they with what they are. In a part like this, you might want to add the box to include here and add the circle to include here. Okay, that's perfectly fine. That is proper English, but since it's math class, it's perfectly acceptable to say if they are not congruent, comma, then two angles are not vertical angles. Okay, so I just went ahead and I switched. Notice they are congruent. They are not congruent because remember I'm switching and add and negating. Two angles are vertical angles. Two angles are not vertical angles because I'm switching and I'm negating. Okay. Um, Perfectly acceptable because you're going to tell me what the they are in the second part of the sentence. But remember, if this was an English sentence for your English teacher, for your English class, you might want to go and extend the circle to include the descriptor of what they are, and then to go ahead and include the they in the then box. Okay. So that if to angle stays in that position, and then they stay in that position as well. Okay, but I would account this as correct. All right. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about, vocabulary wise, are in equivalent statements. Whew, what a tongue twister. Equivalent statements are two statements that are both true or both false. Okay, you can't have one of them true and one of them false. They have to both be true or they have to both be false to be equivalent statements. A conditional statement and its contrapositive are equivalent statements. Remember, the contrapositive is the one where we switch and we negate. So that is a true statement to the original conditional statement. The converse and inverse of any conditional statement are also equivalent statements. All right, I have one that I would like us to try. It's one of my favorites. Before we go ahead and do this, we want to talk about what a conjecture is. A conjecture is an unproven statement that is simply based on observations. All right, let's go ahead and do an example. We're going to practice using our foldable that we just filled out to write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive of this conditional statement. If you are a teenage girl, then you like Justin Bieber. Let's go ahead and identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. What I want you to notice is every time I've showed you a new conditional statement, we've identified the hypothesis, we've identified the conclusion. That way I can simply do the simple switch, the negation, or both the switch and the negation. So find the word if and highlight until you get to the comma. There it is. Box in the word then with a different color, or just a box is fine. And highlight till you get to the period. Okay, repetition, repetition, repetition. There are my hypothesis and my conclusion. Hypothesis in purple, conclusion in orange. All right, let's go ahead and do the converse. Remember, to do the converse, if we look at our foldable, we simply have to switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So it would say, if you like Justin Bieber, remember, don't change the words. I don't want to see the words belieber in there. Then you are a teenage girl. There we go. Now we're actually going to come back and we're going to talk about this. Is this true? Is this false? So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay. All right. The inverse. The inverse says that we are simply going to add the word not. We're simply going to add the word not. So keep the form. If you are not a teenage girl, then you do not like, and I'm going to go ahead and put his initials, Justin Bieber. I'm going to get tired of writing his name. Okay? Right? Notice I added a little bit extra for the not in the hypothesis, because if you put then you not like Justin Bieber, although technically, yes, that is that is um, that is correct for the negation purposes. The nicer sounding way to say it, not correct, but the nicer sounding way to say it is, then you do not like Justin Bieber. Okay. And of course, if you would rather write conjunctions, contractions, if you don't like Justin Bieber, then that's fine. If you aren't a teenage girl, that's perfectly fine. Okay. Oops. All right, last one, the contrapositive. Let's do both. We're going to switch them and we're going to add not. So you, if you do not or don't like Justin Bieber, then you are not or aren't a teenage girl. There we go. All right, the very last thing is a counterexample. A counterexample is a specific case for which my conjecture is false. A specific case for which my conjecture is false. Now, one thing that must stay true for your counterexample, for something to be a counterexample, the hypothesis has to be true. The hypothesis has to stay true. The conclusion is the part that is false. Okay, so our hypothesis must be true. We must keep it the same, but the conclusion is the part that must be false. Okay, it's very tricky. Okay, let's go back up and look at our parts about Justin Bieber. Okay, so if we start out with the very beginning, if you are a teenage girl, you have to stay a teenage girl, then you like Justin Bieber. Well, that's very simple. I could probably find a teenage girl that does not like Justin Bieber, and she is my counterexample. Okay. All right. For the converse, you like Justin Bieber. That has to stay true. This has to be true. I have to like him. Then you are a teenage girl. So my counterexample here would be an adult, a specific adult. You could use me. I can say I like Justin Bieber, or a boy that likes Justin Bieber. Okay. The part that has to be false, like this is the true part, the part that has to be false is the teenage girl. Okay. You have to like him, but not be a teenage girl. All right, so inverse. If you are not a teenage girl, this has to be true. If you are not a teenage girl, then you are a teenage boy or you are an adult. Okay, so those are the ones that must be true. Then you do not like Justin Bieber. This must be false. So all we have to do for a counterexample here is find an adult that's not a teenage girl that likes Justin Bieber. Me. You could use me, or you could say a boy that likes Justin Bieber. And for the last one, if you do not like Justin Bieber, this must be true. It has nothing to do with your age. If you're a teenage girl or you're a teenage boy or you're an adult, or you're a kid, it doesn't matter. Then you are not a teenage girl. Okay? So all we would have to find if you do not like Justin Bieber, true, then you are not a teenage girl, false. So an example would be a teenage boy that does not like Justin Bieber. Teenage boy that does not like Justin Bieber.